I'm Stephanie Valinsky. I'm the Deputy Director at the Illinois Supreme Court Commission on Professionalism. Welcome to Reimagining Law. Today I'm joined by Bob Glaves, who's the Executive Director at the Chicago Bar Foundation. Bob, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Earlier this year, you put together a list of, and I quote, "banned words for access to justice 2.0. Why is the language lawyers and judges use so important?
Thanks, Stephanie. The title's a little tongue-in-cheek, but the idea of it is real. I mean, as lawyers and judges, we're used to precise language when we're talking about law and legal principles. But when we're talking to other people, the language we use sometimes is not understood at all by them, or maybe understood in a way very differently than what we intended. And so using language that people is inclusive and understandable to people beyond the legal community is really important.
For sure. And what would you say, can you give me 3 words that you think lawyers should not be using and why?
Sure, I could probably use the first one for all 3, but I will just stick with the one that I want to start with, which is non-lawyer. We are the only profession that calls everybody who is not us a non. So you don't hear doctors calling everybody else non-doctors. Dentists don't call everybody non-dentists. We are the only ones who do that. And it's kind of the very idea of inclusion is not to talk to people about what they aren't, but who they are. Another one that I talked about was low bono, which may not be as familiar to people, but is sometimes used as a way of saying, for people who make a little bit too much to qualify for free services, that you're giving them some sort of reduced rate or more affordable rate. People will just summarize it to say low bono. So first of all, most people don't even know what you're talking about if you say that. But secondly, if they understand what you're trying to say by that, it doesn't sound very good. It doesn't sound like something you're going to want. And the idea that we have become unaffordable to most everyday people when they have legal problems as a profession is a serious one. And if we're going to talk about being more affordable, we should say that. If we're talking about having sliding scale options for people by income as they do for like healthcare, we should say that.
For sure. And for going back to your non-lawyer, what should lawyers be saying instead? What are those people who aren't quote unquote like us?
Yeah, well, most of them have titles like paralegals and
Right.
chief marketing officer and all the other people we work with who are just as important in delivery of legal services as ultimately the lawyers who are delivering the services are. Whether that's in a law firm, an organization, in the courts, there's just a lot of other advocates and professionals. So when possible, call them by who they are, not what they are. I was going to say who they are. So like we call dental hygienists, not non-dentists.
And even with access to justice, what are some ways you think lawyers can, phrase that or explain that better than we do?
Access to justice, I think, has a meaning to most people that, you're trying to have equal access or trying to level the playing field. I mean, I think most people are using it in that context, but it isn't always understood that way, and not everybody's using it in exactly the same place. So what does access mean? Does that mean everybody has a lawyer? That's not a realistic definition of access to justice. What is necessary for somebody to get a fair shake on the merits and to walk away feeling like they got a fair shake? That is basically the shorthand definition of what I would suggest and we suggest for a definition of access to justice. But, some people see it a little bit differently and they're talking about having a lawyer. Others are just like everybody has forms that they can understand and plain language, but if they really needed a lawyer, they really didn't have access. So just trying to get to a more standard definition is a goal I think that we should all share, whether you like my definition or not. Being clear about what we mean when we say it.
Kind of going off the same kind of string there with access to justice, obviously you do a lot of writing and talking about the topic, and you discuss equity and equality. What is the difference between those two when you're talking about that in this context?
The word equity is used by a lot of people in a lot of different ways. And so we'll hear people talking about equity or that's not equitable, or, but not necessarily meaning it the same way. So another one where clarity about what you're saying is really important. But in the access to justice context, I think there's equality is what we usually talk about, that everybody's going to get treated equally in front of the court, in front of the law. And that is a good concept. I mean, it goes to the whole idea of equal justice under law. But the problem is, if you didn't start equally and then get treated equally, you're not on a level playing field, and that's not going to work out so well. So the idea of equity is, what do we need to make sure that people have an equal opportunity to get that fair shake, to be heard equally, so that they are treated equally? And so, examples can help here. If you don't speak the language, getting an interpreter is one. I think most people understand that, you're not going to, you may be treated equally, but you wouldn't know what everybody was even talking about without the interpreter. And that one's recognized by law, that, you should have access to an interpreter if you need one. But, it can be a lot of things like that, that if you look at the circumstances of somebody not having a lawyer when the other side does, in a situation like an eviction case, you could make the system as understandable and easy to navigate as possible for somebody. But the fact is, they're going to get steamrolled more often than not by the more powerful party who has a lawyer if you don't have one. So having a lawyer in that situation is really critical.
And then finally, any other things lawyers language-wise should clean up for the end of the year?
I will give you a universal one that applies to all of us, and it's acronyms. I think we all have a tendency to do that. And those of us who work around access to justice, and I am guilty a lot of times too, we use them among ourselves and everybody knows what we're talking about. But as soon as you get outside of the choir and you start throwing around acronyms, it's another way to confuse people, not be inclusive, because they think they should know what you're talking about, but they have no idea what you're talking about when you use the acronym.
I like it. It is a good one. It's a good one. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Bob. I really appreciate it. And for all those watching, please go ahead and like and share this video and stay up to date on new episodes. And information on how to stay connected with not only the commission, but also Bob and the work of the Chicago Bar Foundation will be in the notes. So please check that out. And thank you for watching. Happy holidays and stay well, everyone.